A new opinion poll from Leger shows that nearly half of Canadians, 48%, oppose the pro-Palestinian encampments, which have popped up on campuses. University campuses around the world are the center of these student protests over the war in Gaza. One of their demands is having their schools divest from Israel. So taking cues from the movement to divest from South African apartheid, protesters are hoping to put as much social and political pressure as possible on companies that do business with Israel by getting their schools to remove possibly lucrative investments. So joining us now is Nicole Nerea, a senior reporter with Vox, who's been covering this story. Welcome to your morning, Nicole.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So organizers of a pro-Palestinian protest encampment at the University of Toronto has said that they feel the university is ignoring their demands and instead is focusing on the logistics of the demonstration. Overall, what are student protesters looking for? What specifically are their divestment demands?
So I've been primarily focusing on the demands at U.S. universities, but it very much varies across campuses. So, broadly, the demands, as you mentioned, are that universities withdraw any part of their endowments that are invested in firms that profit from or support Israel's war in Gaza and the occupation of Palestine. But on specific campuses, you're seeing different demands more specific to university life. So Brown, for instance, is examining a list of 11 companies with ties to Israel, many of them weapons manufacturers. MIT students want the university to cut its research contracts with the Israeli military. But then you all are also seeing these sort of more broad demands that are kind of drawing from the boycott, divest, sanctions movement that dates back to the mid-2000s.
Has this divestment protest strategy worked in the past? Have we seen universities examine and then pull out of certain investments?
Yeah, so you mentioned one of the two major divestment movements that can kind of serve as instructive examples here. The South African apartheid divestment movement started on university campuses and then became much broader, eventually leading the U.S. government to divest from South African apartheid in a way that forced the forces there to sort of come to the negotiating table and eventually end apartheid. But there is also a still ongoing movement to divest from fossil fuels because of their contribution to climate change. And initially that was met with some resistance on university campuses, and some do still refuse to do so. But some things have made this easier, including the development of fossil fuel-free investment funds and the fact that fossil fuel companies are sort of this well-defined group that protesters could target for divestment. And I think that might be a little bit more of an issue when we're talking about Israel.
Keeping in mind that every university has a different investment portfolio, what would divestment actually entail for these schools?
Yeah, so I think in that sense, it would look different on every campus. But, I think one problem is transparency. So universities typically invest their endowments in a lot of commingled investment funds like index funds, hedge funds, private equity funds. And the hedge funds and private equity funds are particularly problematic because they don't disclose what their investments actually are, which makes transparency difficult. But assuming that we could actually identify the investments that are tied up in Israel, I think there has to be some sort of process of weeding out which ones exactly universities are deciding to target, because there's a lot of major companies included in some of these index funds. Take Google or Cisco, for instance, that have ties to Israel. I think some universities would be open to divesting from such companies just because it would be a major hit to their endowments. But if we are looking at more of a targeted list of companies that students are looking to divest from, then I think universities will have to do this cost-benefit analysis of divesting. Is any potential hit to the endowment really worth the cost to student life and the mission of the university? And I don't think there is necessarily a easy one-size-fits-all answer in that respect.
If we see one university pull out of certain investment, but the war continues, do you think the protests continue?
I think that's a good question. Some universities have already struck deals to dismantle the protesters' encampments by agreeing to consider their demands. That includes Brown and Northeastern. But other universities like Columbia, where all of this started, have refused outright to consider them. And protesters have said they won't stop. But of course, there's a question of how much momentum they can continue to have, especially as campuses clear out ahead of the summer break. But, it also may depend on the geopolitical situation. The Biden campaign is banking, I think, on the notion that all of this blows over by the November election. maybe because they think they can achieve a permanent ceasefire. And last night in an interview, we did see Biden come out pretty strongly against an invasion of Rafah, and sort of refusing to send weapons that support that operation. So, it's clear that he's hearing the demands of the protesters, but it's unclear whether they might be satisfied with some sort of resolution here to the conflict in Gaza.
All right, we'll continue to watch how this unfolds, both south of the border and here in Canada. Nicole Naria, thank you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you liked this, be sure to subscribe here, or you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.